morning.
Good morning, colleagues.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, Mela. Thanks for coming. Christoph.
Hello, Rodrigo.
Martina,
Hello.
Angela, hello.
Good morning.
Hello.
Máximo, buenos días.
Buenos días, ¿cómo estás?
Muy bien. Isabel, bom dia.
Bom dia. Bom dia. Olá, Rodrigo.
Good morning and welcome. Shall we start, Rodrigo?
Yeah, I would say so.
Okay.
Thanks, Mirto.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our fourth FAO Brussels Dialogue, organized by the FAO Liaison Office in Brussels. My name is Mirto Arvaniti, and I will be your moderator today. Before we start, please see on this slide some housekeeping rules. We're above all looking forward to interacting with you, our audience. Your mics and videos are automatically disabled. However, you can interact with one another in the panel as well using the chat box. At any moment during the event, feel free to post your questions for our speakers in the Q&A box you can see at the bottom of your Zoom screen. Any questions you may be posting in the chat box will not be answered. When posting a question, please also include your name, organization, and speaker that you're addressing your question to. The Q&A box will also be observed and answered by our technical colleagues who are on this event today. So do not hesitate at any moment to ask questions. So today we mark the first International Day of Awareness of Food Loss and Waste, a very current theme for Europe and the world. FAO estimates that globally, 14% of our food is lost before we even have a chance to buy it. Our agenda today will start with a welcome from the director of the FAO Liaison Office in Brussels, Rodrigo de la Puerta, followed by a video dedicated to the International Day. Immediately afterwards, we're delighted to have with us today Ms. Claire Berry. Ms. Berry is Deputy Director General at the European Commission's Directorate General for Health and Food Safety. Wrapping up our event today, we will have some remarks from a member of the European Parliament and the European Parliamentary Alliance Against Hunger and Malnutrition, Ms. Isabel Carballais. During the interactive Q&A session we will have later on with our distinguished technical panelists, we will want to look into solutions to this environmental and ethical challenge that is the food waste. Our speakers came today from an array of sectors with a presentation from the United Nations, private sector, and social impact organization, but I will introduce them all later on. I would like to start first with a quick quiz to test our knowledge when it comes to food loss and waste. If you open your browsers and you go to www.menti.com, you will see this code that is highlighted in yellow on the slide. Please insert this code and the first question should appear. Let's see if we can guess or if we even know what is, we're gonna go now on the Menti, the monetary value of food losses. Is it 200 billion US dollars, 250 billion US dollars, 400 billion US dollars, or 600 billion US dollars? I see people keep voting. Actually, very good. It is 400 billion US dollars. This is the right answer. We can maybe go now to the second question. So, which foods are being lost the most? Is it cereals and pulses, fruits and vegetables, meat and animal products, roots, tubers, and oil-bearing crops? Let's see. Okay, so actually, this one you didn't guess or you didn't know so well, because the right answer is roots, tubers, and oil-bearing crops. It is representing 25% of total food loss. And all this data and many more are available in the FAO report, The State of Food and Agriculture 2019, the link of which my colleagues will insert in the chat box for you to see. So after this quiz, I would like now to give the floor to Rodrigo de la Puerta, the director of the FAO Liaison Office in Brussels, for his opening remarks. Rodrigo, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mirto. Good morning, excellencies, partners, colleagues. Today, as you know, we celebrate for the first time the International Day of Awareness of Food Loss and Waste, which was approved in December 2019 by the UN General Assembly. The observance of these days has a great significance. It is a call for action for the public and private sector, civil society, and each one of us to reduce food loss and waste. But most importantly, it is a call to fight hunger and all forms of malnutrition. And this can only be achieved if we address the inefficiencies and inequities of food systems that lead to unacceptable levels of food loss and waste. Reducing food loss and waste brings better food security and nutrition, economic growth, and environmental sustainability. So it is a win-win situation for everyone, developing and developing countries, but we are not doing enough. In a world where 690 million people suffer from hunger And with 130 million more to go hungry as a result of the crisis triggered by COVID-19, food loss and waste need to be drastically reduced. For that, we need concerted actions to strengthen our food systems through creation of enabling environments for investment, introduction of innovative solutions, of good practices, capacity building development, and awareness raising. Maximo Torero, FAO's chief economist, will be explaining in a second how COVID-19 is bringing additional food losses in a moment where more and more people are having difficulties to access adequate food. To this end, FAO, the Food and Agriculture Organization, works hand in hand with governments, institutions, private sector, civil society, academia, to reduce food loss and waste through data collection, research, technical support, and advocacy. FAO and the United Nations Environment Programme are measuring progress towards SDG target 12.3 through the Food Loss Index led by FAO and the Food Waste Index led by UNEP. This data is essential to provide guidance on where and how to intervene. FAO works also with the EU Commission and its platform on food loss and waste to bolster actions addressing the problem. And I really thank you today, the Deputy Director General of DG Santé, for delivering the opening statement today. We also joined forces with the European Parliamentary Alliance Against Hunger and Malnutrition to educate and sensitize young generations to the issue of food waste. An educational package titled Do Good, Save Food, developed by FAO and the International Food Waste Coalition, is teaching children of different ages in schools to develop new consumption habits and therefore reducing food loss now and in the future. And I'm so happy also to have today one of the most committed members of the European Parliament on this topic, Ms. Isabel Carballais, who will be providing some concluding remarks. FAO has also recently launched a technical platform on the measurement and reduction of food loss and waste. This platform is consolidated in one place, not only FAO's work, but also all the developments from many other partners to facilitate the exchange of information, experiences, and solutions through a community of practice. I just wanted to give you one example of what we do in the field. In a number of countries in Eastern Europe, Balkans, and Central Asia, FAO has conducted food loss and waste assessments to identify critical loss points in the food supply chain and the underlying causes of those losses. The results are helping to develop national strategies to reduce food loss and waste in these countries. So I'll stop here, just saying that today, under the trying moments that our world is facing, each one of us can do something for the people and for the planet. And on this topic, on this specific topic, we can really do something, each one of us. So tomorrow, let's continue to remember that we are part of the solution. Your engagement as policymakers, as activists, as consumers, as students, will make the difference in this crucial time. So please take action, spread the word on this importance of food loss and waste reduction. Thank you very much for being here today. Over to you, Mirto.
Thank you very much, Rodrigo. Let us now watch a short video my colleagues prepared, especially for this International Day. Video, please.
It's easy to forget how food arrives on your plate.
And that makes it even easier to waste it.
Let's end food loss and waste today.
29 September 2020.
International Day of Awareness of Food Loss and Waste.
Ms. Berry, the European Union launched almost a year ago the European Green Deal, and one of its main pillars is the farm to fork strategy. You yourself are responsible for food sustainability. Thank you for joining us today. You have the floor.
Okay, so there we are. I think I'm unmuted now. So good morning, everybody, and thank you very much to the FAO for organising this event and for organising the day today. It's a real pleasure to be here with you, Rodrigo and Isabel, sharing a panel and to be here at the opening of this day. I'm very happy to help celebrate the first day of awareness of food loss and waste. So the European Commission joins the FAO and other organisations, both public and private, in the global call to action against food loss and waste. And we're contributing also on this day with a series of activities to inform, educate and engage citizens and stakeholders on this important issue. Our food system places significant pressure on our planet, and by 2050 it's expected that we will have 10 billion people living on the planet. And if we want to ensure that they will have access to a sufficient supply of safe and nutritious food, despite limited natural resources and of course climate change, we need an urgent transformation of our food system. One of the actions which we can take immediately is to prevent food loss and waste and stop losing important natural, financial and human resources. I would like to say firstly where we are in the EU and secondly what we hope to do next. So where are we now? The most recent global challenge, the COVID-19 pandemic, has forced us to rethink the status quo and to adapt quickly to a new reality. It's reinforced the importance of sustainable food systems, from how we produce and process food to the supply chains that bring it to our homes. Systemic challenges require systemic responses, so we need collective action by all actors and at all stages of the food supply chain. This International Day reminds us about the challenge posed by food loss and waste and how to overcome it. At EU level, important measures are already in place to reduce food loss. Member states are obliged to reduce food waste at each stage of the food supply chain, to measure and to report on food waste levels. Soon they will be able to track their progress and take targeted measures. The Commission has adopted guidelines to facilitate the donation of unsold food and the safe use of food, which is no longer intended for human consumption as animal feed. Importantly, we have established, as Rodrigo mentioned, an EU platform on food losses and food waste, whose spirit of sharing and cooperation can be a model for others, and whose recommendations for actions can provide impetus and direction for all players. But what comes next? As Commissioner Kyriakides said yesterday in a statement, and as Rodrigo said, we need to do more. We're not doing enough. So now within the EU, we want to go further and make food loss and waste prevention an indispensable part of all EU policies and addressing the food system. This approach has been outlined not only in the Green Deal, but also in the recently adopted Farm to Fork strategy. The strategy, adopted in May 2020, puts forward a series of actions that enable the transition to a sustainable EU food system that safeguards food security and ensures access to healthy diets sourced from a healthy planet. Reducing food loss and waste is an integral part of this strategy, which proposes to set, by 2023, legally binding targets to reduce food waste in the EU member states. Despite all the measures that have been taken so far at local, national and EU level, curbing food loss and waste remains an important challenge. We need to do more, making food waste prevention an integral part of day-to-day action of operation of actors of the food supply chain, and as citizens, we need to take action in our own daily lives to reduce food waste. The European Union is using its research and innovation programmes, as well as financial instruments, to support innovation in the food supply chain, deliver knowledge for policymaking and solutions to prevent food loss and waste in practice. We're committed in the EU to lead by example and to foster collaboration, not only within the EU, but also on an international level. So the Commission regularly exchanges information and shares experience with non-EU partners, in particular on food waste measurement. It's also closely involved in the development of a global code of conduct on food loss and food waste prevention. In particular, the Commission values its cooperation with the FAO, which is why it's such a pleasure to be here today, and we look forward to continuing cooperation and ensuring global progress towards the Sustainable Goal 20.3 targets. So today, as we celebrate the first ever International Day of Awareness on Food Loss and Waste, I hope firstly that this International Day will provide new impetus for collective action against food loss and waste in the EU and worldwide. Secondly, that we can demonstrate that by taking action together, we can reduce the impact of food loss and waste on our food system and our planet. And thirdly, that all of us here will take time today, as the video was prompting us to, and indeed in the coming days and weeks, to play our part in reducing food waste. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Berry. Certainly, FAO and the Commission will continue intensifying the collaboration. As you know, we're very closely following your work on the farm to fork and biodiversity strategies. I see people are asking, so let me remind you at this point that our event is also live on the FAO YouTube channel. It is also being recorded. It will be available on that channel, but we will also share the link of the event afterwards with you. So let me now move to the panel discussion. I'm happy to present Máximo Torero Puyén, FAO's Chief Economist. We also have here with us today Angela Frigo, Secretary General of the European Food Banks Federation. From the UN Environment Programme, we're pleased to be joined by Martina Otto, Head of Cities. And of course, we have on the panel Mela Frewen, the Director General of FoodDrink Europe, as well as Christophe Dirksens, Global Public Affairs Manager of Too Good To Go. Maximo, let me first turn to you. I know you are truly committed to the FAO's work on sustainable food systems, and food loss and waste represent a major challenge for their resilience. Could you give us a brief overview of what are the major steps FAO is taking to contribute to the reduction of food loss and waste, and particularly the food loss part, since FAO is the custodian of the Food Loss Index?
Thank you very much, and it's a pleasure to be here. Today is an extremely important day for all of us. And why this is so important, just to be very brief, today we have 690 million people undernourished, which could increase 132 million because of the COVID-19. We have 2 billion people that don't have access to regular food and 3 billion people that don't have access to healthy diets. In this context, in previous estimations of FAO, we needed around $265 billion to be able to reduce hunger to zero by 2030. And we face a situation where we have $400 billion of food loss and waste. So this contradiction is unacceptable, as we have been saying. It's unethical. It cannot happen. Doesn't make any sense that we are losing $400 billion in food and waste, food loss and waste, which could be used to create and give access to healthy diets to people in the current situation that we are facing. So what if FAO is doing? The first thing that FAO start to do is to bring up the concepts. Part of our role is to set up the proper concepts to measure things properly so that we can have correct baselines. So in 2011, FAO raised the issue of 1/3 of the food is lost or waste. And that was basically to create awareness of the importance of the topic. But that was just a number that raised the importance of the topic in our society. But then we moved last year in the SOFA 2019 to come up with a very clear indicator of what was losses and what was waste, which is a responsibility of UNEP. In the case of FAO, we are the custodian of the loss index. And the food loss index is telling us what is lost from the post-harvest up to the wholesale included, so just before the retail. And we were able to come up with a number, which we call it the baseline, over which we need to track change and performance. And our number is that today, the level of losses in the value chain is 14% of all the food produced. That's a significant number because still we are not adding the waste part, okay? So clearly we can easily reach the 1/3 that it was calculated in 2011 or even more, depending on how much the waste part is. But the important thing is that we not only need to have a global number, but we need to understand how it varies across the different nodes of the value chain. And that's how we decided to go in detail and focus on which parts of the value chain the losses were occurring. And we also assessed if we had to look even before the post-harvest part, the pre-harvest part. And this is extremely important even today, especially with COVID-19, Why? Because what we are expecting is that because of the global recession that we're going to face, many developing countries that produce to export high-value commodities like fruits and milk and meat and vegetables, they will be facing a significant reduction of the demand of these high-end products with high level of attributes. And that means that they won't even harvest. So everything will be left in the field. So let me give you a very concrete example of my country, Peru. Peru is an exporter of mangoes. And we export mangoes of different calibers, different colors, different sizes. That's what the international demand is about. It's organic mangoes. If a farmer doesn't have the market of the UK or the market of Europe or the US for those mangoes, of those characteristics, the local market won't pay at all the cost of that production and won't pay at all that price that he's expecting to have to be able to continue producing. So what he will do is basically he will left this produce on the trees, on the mango trees, and they won't even be harvested. And that will increase substantially what we call left in the field, which is another type of loss, which the index doesn't capture because the index goes from post-harvest up to wholesale. But the index allows us to expand behind. So my point, what I'm trying to make is having the number and having a clear definition of what we mean, I think is extremely helpful to move forward. Also, it's extremely important to understand what it implies in terms of caloric footprint. For example, we know today that for cereals and pulses, the level of losses is 912 trillion calories, kilocalories. We know that the carbon footprint only on cereals and pulses is 519 million tons of CO2 equivalent. And that's what brings what it was said before. Reducing losses have three wins. It improves food security and nutrition, because if we do actions early in the supply chain, we will having a bigger impact in terms of prices to consumers, in terms of income to farmers. It improves productivity, efficiency gains, which are central today. We need to improve the efficiency across the value chain. And also it reduces emissions and affects less environment, because clearly when we are at the consumer, when the produce already arrived to the wholesale and the retail part, especially in the consumer, it has already incurred a significant amount of investments in emissions. So if we are able to avoid that waste, we will be saving significant amount of reduction of emissions. So it's a triple win that we will have. And interventions will vary in where we want to do it. If we want to improve our natural resources, which today are in a pretty tight condition, of course, we do it upstream the value chain. If we want to reduce emissions, we do it downstream the value chain. But the important thing here is that there is no need to be in the situation we are today, and we need to stop that. The next step of what FAO is doing is trying to identify all the best practices in the different interventions. We need to know what is cost effective, because for a farmer to adopt a technology, it needs to be cost effective for him. It doesn't make any sense that I explain a farmer how to reduce aflatoxins by drying their product better and packaging them properly in plastic bags that we know that have the higher return in terms of the impact of reduction of losses. But if you put the grain in that bag with humidity, then it will be worse. So if we teach them and he invests, and then he tries to bring his produce to the market, and the buyer says, I don't care, I basically pay the same no matter it's aflatoxin free or it's not aflatoxin free, then why the farmer will have the incentive? So we need to align incentive. We need to bring cost-effective best practices, and we need to change behavior of people. That's extremely important. And the platform that we have launched, the technical platform of measurement and reduction of food losses, is trying to bring all those best practices. So we hope to collaborate with the European Union and with all the different players that are working so that we can bring in one spot all the best practices that are available and trying to move them to action, which is essential. But we also need solid evidence. And FAO just issued a special issue on food policy that brings all the academic work, technical work we have brought, peer review, so that everybody can have access to it. Anybody can download it publicly. It's peer review work. So we are not only looking at the estimation, clear methodology, cost-benefit interventions, and how to share them so that we can scale them up, but also solid evidence, which is part of our normative work, because we need to act and change it as soon as possible. Thank you.
That was really interesting. Thank you very much, Maximo. I'm sure the audience will have a lot of questions on what you just explained to us. So let me now move to Angela. Angela, you are the Secretary General of the European Food Banks Federation. Do you expect the role of the European food banks to change in the months to come in a post-COVID context? Also having in mind that the number of people at risk of poverty and social exclusion might keep growing. And I want to ask you, what measures should be taken by food banks, in your view, to adapt to this new situation?
Thank you very much, first of all, for the invitation to join this meeting. And for us, today, it's a really important day. So we are very happy to celebrate the first International Day of Awareness of Food Loss and Waste, because food waste prevention has been our everyday life since the foundation of the first food bank in Europe in 1984 in Paris, in France. So we are very happy that today we can celebrate with everyone. And answering to your question, I would say that the role of food banks, which consist in the daily recovery and redistribution of good food for free to charities that are assisting people in need in Europe, is not going to change in the months to come. So we will not change our activity, but we will innovate the way we do it. And since the beginning of our activity in 1984, European food banks have always adapted their activity to the evolution of the food supply chain, but also to financial and political crises. We will keep looking for new collaboration with the private and the public sectors. We will reorganize our activity, and we will digitize some of our traditional actions, and we will ask young generation to help us. And food banks, we will always express their full creativity and also professionalism in this new and increasingly complex environment. Today we are facing, due to the impact of the COVID-19, we are facing an increased demand for food in Europe, a shortage of volunteers, and also a drop in financial resources. But food banks are constantly looking for new supplies, a better cost-efficient model, and also innovations. And we are implementing a variety of actions in our 29 countries in Europe. So we have actions such as the gleaning in the fields to prevent food loss, but also the recovery of surplus food from cruise ships, or the freezing of meat and fish in order to extend the shelf life of these very precious food products. The use of technology to optimize the management of food, but also the preparation of healthy and nutritious meals that we can then deliver to charities. And also the processing of fruit and vegetables to extend the shelf life and to have products such as juices or jams or soups which are ready to use. And we know that we cannot achieve all these by ourselves. And as it was said at the beginning, each one of us can do something. And this is a chain of solidarity, starting from the food supply chain, passing through the food banks, and arriving to the charities that are helping people in need in Europe. And the figures of people in need are increasing due to the COVID-19. And the COVID-19 was really a challenge for European food banks, as you can imagine, because we experienced a fluctuation of the food supply chain. And it was a tremendous challenge for our logistics. We had many different pickup points. We had to manage chilled and frozen food in a period where due to the lockdown in most of the countries, there were restrictions in place to limit the mobility. We had a shortage of volunteers because most of our volunteers are over 65, so they were a group at risk due to the COVID. But today we can say that food banks, European food banks, are up and running. They are working 100%, and they are facing a growing food demand of 30% of at European level. And at the same time, they are also managing the double quantities in comparison to last year. So in the first 6 months of 2020, our food banks redistributed double quantities in comparison to last year. And just to give you a few numbers, last year we redistributed 600,000 tons of surplus food. So it's food which was rescued from becoming waste, and it was redistributed to charities for free, helping people in need. Today, we represent 430 food banks in 29 European countries, and they are supporting 9.5 million people in need in Europe. So what is the role of food banks today, but also in the coming months? I'll say that we have shown evidence that food banks are a reliable partner, not only to feed people in need, but first of all, to foster the resilience of the food supply chain and to prevent that good food goes to waste. And if I can quote the title of this event, I would say that food banks are dreamers because first of all, they are doers. So we are contributing every day to the fight and to prevent food losses and waste. And this is our daily and concrete contribution. And we are very happy to have the possibility to contribute every day with our activity and to reach together challenging objectives such as the SDG target 12.3. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Angela. Personally, I don't think there's anything wrong with being a dreamer. And you actually mentioned the right words, solidarity and personal responsibility. I think that we need to keep in mind. Martina Otto from the UN Environment Programme. We work a lot with the UN Environment Programme here in Brussels. Martina, I would like to ask you, we know that UNEP, the UN Environment Programme, like FAO for the agriculture sector, is very much involved in the discussion around the national determined contributions and the importance of sustainable food systems to reduce our impact on the environment and the climate. Could you explain a little bit what UNEP is doing, having in mind that your agency is custodian of the food waste index? I remind you, Maximo talked about the food loss index before. Martina, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mirto, and I'm very happy to be with all of you for this first celebration of the International Day of Awareness of Food Loss and Waste. And I would like to make 3 points. And the first is that indeed sustainable food systems are critical to reduce our impact on the environment and climate, as our food systems are the dominant user of our natural resources, and according to the IPCC, about 21 to 37 of total greenhouse gas emissions are attributable to our food systems. So at UNEP, we're a strong advocate for a systems approach, a holistic approach from production to transport, processing, packaging, storage, retail, consumption, as well as food loss and waste. So looking at it as a system. And we are working to facilitate such sustainable food systems policies and programs at the national and local levels. For example, with our collaborative framework for food systems transformation. And there's a few key activities that are highlighted, and one of which is actually really this emphasis on food consumption as a driver. And I want to make my 2 other points around this topic, but it's pretty clear that if we don't get this right, unsustainable food consumption and production does present a serious threat to food security and environmental and economic resilience. So my second point is the fact that there is an increasing urban population that puts further pressure on environment and climate, as there is a tendency to diets that are richer in resource-intensive products, ultra-processed food and drink products. And we talk about a supermarketization, which is globally affecting food value chains while also influencing eating habits, leading to a globalization of our diets. And at UNEP, we're supporting cities to adopt measures to promote urban and peri-urban farming. And this is a way to revalorizing food production as well, to emphasize fresh and seasonal produce and thereby influence food consumption, and really bringing home the message that, we talked about electricity is not only coming out of the socket, there's a whole system behind that. And here it's the same. We've lost so much touch of how food is being produced as well. It's not only coming out of the supermarket, and by having a greater valorization of what it is, there's also a likelihood of less wasting it. So there's a real opportunity here. And we've just seen with COVID this fragility of our food systems. And we've seen mayors setting aside land, supporting associations and youth in particular, making space for farmers markets, for example, providing them with a direct outlet to consumers. And now my third point really is about food loss and waste. And this is one reflection of unsustainability of our food consumption and production patterns. And besides being an ethical and social disgrace that has been mentioned already, food loss and waste generate 8% of greenhouse gas emissions. And we do know that this number is rather on the lower end as we look into getting more data on this. Now I'm coming really to these nationally determined contributions. And here, food consumption, and here I mean diets and food waste, has been overlooked in nationally determined contributions that have been submitted to the UNFCCC Secretariat. And only 11 countries included food loss in the 2015 NDCs, and none of them included explicitly food waste. Yet, by adding food consumption issues to national climate plans, policymakers can improve their mitigation and adaptation contributions from food systems by as much as 25%. So there's a real lost opportunity here that we need to address. Now, UNEP, together with WWF and the EAT Foundation, has issued a new report entitled Enhancing NDCs for Food Systems that does provide guidance to help governments reduce the climate impact of their food systems. And one of the first recommendations made in this document is to adopt SDG 12.3 as a national target and to measure food loss and waste, to have a baseline in place. And there are examples that this approach of target, measure, act does work at country and business level. For example, the United Kingdom is the first country to get more than halfway toward meeting this target, having reduced its national food loss and waste levels by 27% from 2007 to 2018. And likewise, there's a number of big companies that have done so as well. So it's doable, but the data is still scarce. And you mentioned we're the custodian of the SDG indicator 12.3 1B, the food waste index, so the corresponding thing to what FAO has been doing for a number of years now with the food loss index. And we are finalizing a harmonized methodology on food waste measurement for countries, and we're modeling national food waste generation for countries that do not yet have a baseline. And we do that with a technical partner and fellow champion of 12.3 RAP. And it will be published in early 21. So watch this space. And we are actually supporting countries to apply this methodology. And I'd stop here for the time being. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Martina. Indeed, we will be watching out for that. And 3 good points for also our public to think about today and ask you questions later on. Let's now move to the Director General of FoodDrink Europe. Mela, good morning. FoodDrink Europe supports companies in the food and drink sector adapting their operations to the EU rules and regulations. I wanted to ask you, how does your organization work with its members to promote food waste reduction in compliance with the European Green Deal? So what measures are they taking as regards to food labeling, for example, packaging, production practices?
Good morning, Mirta. Good morning, everyone, and many thanks to the FAO for the invitation. It really is a very important day, so congratulations on having this International Day for Food Loss and Waste. So we know that more than a third of food produced in the world is lost or wasted. Here in Europe, approximately 20% of food produced is lost or wasted, while indeed, even in Europe, so every second day, some 40 million people cannot afford a quality meal. So it's not a problem for the rest of the world, it's also a problem here in Europe. Food waste represents a missed opportunity, therefore, to feed people, but it's also a major waste of resources and a needless source of greenhouse gas emissions. And of course, this has a huge impact on climate change. So we as an organization have been taking actions to reduce food losses throughout the chain for more than a decade. We work closely with our members in this, and we are, of course, committed to having food waste by 2030. In fact, our priority is to increase the efficiency in the supply chain. So we work upstream and downstream with our partners along the chain. And our priority again, so is to increase efficiency and prevent food waste in the first place. But there are surpluses, and where these cannot be avoided, food, of course, should first and foremost be redirected to feeding people, after which it should be redirected to using for feed, etc., in accordance with the food waste hierarchy. So our journey towards prevention of food loss started for real in 2013. We launched a joint declaration called Every Crumb Counts. It was developed with 17 other stakeholders, and it described a whole series of commitments that the industry took to reducing food waste throughout the food chain. And as part of the Every Crumb Counts commitments, we delivered an industry food waste prevention toolkit. And this was aimed at helping food and drink manufacturers prevent food waste within their own operations, and also our partners up and downstream to prevent food waste across the chain. This was followed in 2014. We produced a report entitled Preventing Food Wastage in the Food and Drink Sector. And this looked at all the different actions that have been undertaken by food companies and their partners. It includes advice, for example, on finding alternative channels for food products that are safe, of course, but not suitable for distribution. These could be, for example, foods that have been slightly damaged, creased packaging, or slightly torn packaging. But of course, food, by definition, that is still safe. In 2016, we worked with FEBA, so with our colleague Angela, and the European Food Banks on food donation guidelines. We call these guidelines Every Meal Matters. We were supported in this by the European retailers, and the guidelines were supported and endorsed by the European Commission. In 2016, we also launched our Ingredients for a Circular Economy. This is all the work the industry does on promoting circular economy. We launched our circular economy website in order to raise awareness of what the circular economy means and how the industry can deliver on a more circular economy. But since then, we've also committed to the SDG 12.3 target, and FoodDrink Europe has actively contributed to the development and support of various international and European platforms dedicated to fighting food waste. For example, it's part of the Friends of Champions 12.3, this network which contributes to worldwide momentum on the issue. And it's also an active member of the European Commission's platform on food losses and food waste. Finally, last December 2019, when the Commission came out with its recommendations for action in food waste prevention, we were a key stakeholder in the development of that. So we've been working with our companies to improve processing practices through training, for example, raising awareness, finding where the hotspots are and how to prevent food wastage at all levels of their production and procurement and logistics. We've been looking at finding innovative packaging solutions, because packaging, of course, is a huge part of reduction of food loss. But there's a very fine balance between reducing and recycling packaging materials while at the same time ensuring food safety, shelf life, and prevention of waste. So this is quite a sensitive area. We've also worked with the industry, which can now offer different portion sizes. This is important because if you have a different range of portion sizes, these will cater to different lifestyles, to different household needs. We also work on providing useful consumer information. So providing information to consumers about proper storage of their foods, date marking, so whether it's best before or use by dates, meal planning, freezing, safe handling of foods, and even cooking recipes to prepare foods in multiple ways that can help avoid waste. And then, of course, redistribution. And that's where the food banks come in. When there are surpluses, ensuring any safe food is redistributed to people in need is very important for the industry. And this is where the food banks have a key role to play. So I'll stop there for the moment and pass it back to you, Mirto. Thank you.
Thank you, Mel. I think it's very important. Now you gave us this overview of what the industry is doing, which is actually paramount in preventing food waste. I actually didn't know you were working with the food banks. So I think a lot of questions will come also from our audience for you. Let me now turn to Christophe. Christophe, I must confess, when we added you as a panelist for this event, all the young members in our office got really very excited. You're up to good to go. I think it's very well appreciated among the youth, and I must confess, not only. However, we all see a great number of new applications and digital tools being developed every year. They are all designed to tackle the same issue, food waste. So I want to ask you, to what extent do you think technology and innovation is a solution to the problem?
Thanks very much, Mirto. Good morning, everyone, and thanks to the FAO for inviting us, first of all. We're really thrilled to be part of this very important day. I think this really goes to show what an important issue food loss and food waste, unfortunately, is. So maybe briefly to start, for those who don't know Too Good To Go, we are a social impact company whose mission is to both empower and inspire people to fight food waste together. To empower people in the fight against food waste, what we've done is that we've created an application on smartphone that functions like a marketplace for surplus food. So our app links consumers to stores that have surplus food, such as bakeries, hotels, restaurants, you name it. So that at the end of the day, consumers can browse, choose, reserve, and pick up a magic bag of surplus food at discount price that would otherwise have been thrown away. So 4 years since our launch, we're very proud to say that we've by now saved about 46 million meals. We work together with 53,000 stores across Europe. And we have about 26 million consumers in Europe that use our application. And our reach currently spans 14 European countries. So, we quickly realized that much more than an application, we could do even more than using technology to fight food waste, even more than through saving meals, which is why we launched our movement against food waste. And the movement against food waste at Too Good To Go really aims to inspire people by achieving change in mindset and changing attitudes towards food with both people at home, with students in schools, with businesses, and also with policymakers. Give you a few examples. 10% of all food waste across the supply chain is linked or can directly be linked to the lack of understanding of product expiry dates. So we've been working for months and even a couple of years with food manufacturers across Europe to improve expiration dates and ensure that consumers understand these dates better and throw away a lot less food as a result of that misunderstanding. We also work together with the FAO on their Do Good Safe Food initiative that Rodrigo mentioned in the beginning, to raise awareness with the next generation and really inspire kids and students in the fight against food waste. So today, on the International Day of Awareness on Food Loss and Waste, we're very happy to announce two things. First of all, and very briefly, we're proud to announce that for the first time, we will launch our activities outside of Europe, in New York City today, and in Boston next week. And food waste presents an enormous challenge over there as well. And so we're happy to go meet that challenge. And secondly, also today we're launching our new strategic initiative, which aims to tackle food waste even more prominently at local level, and particularly in cities. Too Good To Go is very much built on the fact that we have very strong local presence in cities and in every country where we are active. So in cities in every country where we are. You combine that with the fact that cities are real hotspots for food waste and for general consumption of natural resources overall and greenhouse gas emissions, we've decided to launch our Zero Food Waste Cities initiatives across Europe. Hopefully you'll see a lot about that, hear a lot about that through the course of the day and in the weeks and months to come. What is Zero Food Waste Cities? It's really a call to action to mayors across Europe to step up their efforts in the fight against food waste. Across the EU, both at EU level and in member states, targets are being set to reduce food waste. Ambitions are being increased to reduce food waste, and that's great, it's very important. But we realize that it's at city level where concrete measures and actions can really be taken to reduce food waste. And that's why we've decided to launch this city level initiative today. There are a lot of best practices already carried out in many European cities, Milan, Paris, to name a few. What we want to do is really to share those existing best practices and help cities, other cities implement them further. So I won't go into too much detail, but we've identified 4 steps through which city governments can take action and become a zero food waste city that go from separating waste accurately, measuring levels of food waste. Then third, preventing food waste and be active on the redistribution of food waste. And finally, treating and valorizing food waste. So as I said, I hope we'll hear a lot from us today in the context of Zero Food Waste Cities initiative. And I look forward a lot to today's discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Christophe. Congratulations also on your launches today. So many, I think, new things our audience did not know about. We will go, I'm sure you have also a lot of questions. So before taking your questions, I would like to show you a real case of turning the food loss problem into a successful business. So let's go for a moment to the Kindia region in Guinea. Miss Fatoumata Sissoko decided to create her own fruit drying business when she saw that a large amount of ananas, mangoes, and other fruits were rotting in the fields outside Conakry. Her company today employs 10 women and offers her products of dried fruits and juices to supermarkets all over the country. She aspires to also export internationally. And to put it in her own words, one needs to be serious, work hard, and have a small push with equipment and training, and a lot can be achieved. We would have loved to have Ms. Sissoko with us today live. However, her internet connection was not good enough for that, but she sent us a small video. Can we have the video?
Bonjour, je suis Sissoko Fatoumata, gérante de l'entreprise Fatou et Khadija, spécialisée dans le séchage de fruits et légumes à Kindia. Alors j'ai créé mon entreprise en 2014 qui devait normalement récupérer toutes les pertes post-récolte qu'enregistraient les producteurs. Je me suis lancée dans l'ananas séché, la mangue séchée et les jus d'ananas et de mangue. Alors là j'emploie 10 femmes et comme permanente et 20 contractuels au niveau de la plateforme de séchage qui se trouve à Kindia. On est en train de mettre en place un dispositif pour récupérer les pertes enregistrées au niveau des producteurs dans les autres zones de la Guinée. Nous proposons l'ananas séché dans plusieurs boutiques et supermarchés de Conakry. Nous proposons des jus de fruits, ananas et mangue aussi au niveau de Conakry et on espère étendre notre marché sur l'export à la sous-région et à l'international. Parce que le potentiel est là et on a la possibilité d'avoir la matière première en grande quantité. L'expertise, on le trouve sur place et la technologie aussi est sur place de nos jours. Alors il faut juste mettre un peu de volonté et de sérieux dans le travail.
So unfortunately, the editing ended a little bit abruptly of the video. However, we really appreciated her effort to do that. And I really hope you found it really inspiring. We can now take your questions. Please note also that my colleagues, experts in the field of food loss and waste, will be replying to your questions in written in the Q&A box. If you would like to ask your question live, to do so, please say for which panelist it is. I would also like to remind you that our participants, that you need to include your organization as well when sending your question. And I believe we have a first question from the EUFIC, the European Food Information Council. I don't know if they're online.
Yes, hello, thank you, Mirto. And thank you for the inspiring panel. Inspiration is what we need in the face of adversities. I'm Dr. Milka Sokolovic, Head of Food and Health Science in EUFIC. And EUFIC, or the European Food Information Council, is a non-profit organization that translates food and health science into digestible language to help people make sense and use of it. And we communicate about the relationship between food and health. And in the last several years, our focus has increasingly turned to healthy and sustainable diets and the sustainable behaviors around food, with the food waste obviously being one of our most important topics. So obviously, we are also supporting the celebration of the first International Day of Awareness of Food Loss and Waste today through our communication channels. Now, my question, which goes along the lines of the issues raised by Martina and Christophe, among others, addresses all panelists, in fact. So with the amount of food lost and wasted from the smallholder producers over transport, processing, packaging, storage, retail, all the way to the consumer, I think it's clear that the pressure is high on the awareness and on the individual responsibility to reduce our own food disposal. So the question is, how do we ensure that the awareness is raised? And also, how do we ensure that the people are really placed in the center of the equation with all their concerns, including economic or cultural, rather than being an afterthought in the high-level stakeholder exchanges? So happy to hear your thoughts, and thank you in advance.
Who would like to take this question? I don't know if...
I'm happy to start if you want. Just to say that, yes, this awareness is crucial, and it goes hand in hand with responsibility taken in other aspects of the food chain. This is why to go we work with people, with households to ensure this awareness exists. We see notable differences between countries, but nevertheless we try to share best practice tips on how to cook food, how to store food. This has increased a lot during the recent pandemic, or the current pandemic and the recent lockdown period. But putting people and households at the center to make sure that this awareness exists is indeed crucial.
Thank you. Any others?
Yes, thank you, Mirto. Hello, Milka. I think you're quite right. Awareness is really, really crucial, and consumers must be at the heart of this as well. For me, something that's really important is making sure we start with kids. I mean, the children are very important. I think schools could make an effort, an increased effort, to let the children see how food waste can be devastating, to explain to them why it's not good to throw away the food that they bring to school, bring the messages home to their parents. This is working. I see it working, for example, in the field of water. Some ads that I've seen on television show kids pointing out to their moms, why do you rinse that plate before you put it into the dishwasher, mom? This is all this water going down the drain. Well, the same sort of thing could happen, I think, in schools, but also through advertising, even in supermarkets, and of course throughout the industry. So there are ways to increase awareness, but I really think it should start with kids.
If I could come in as well, and we do work with the schools around edible school yards, school gardens. So that's a way of sensitizing. Another way that I mentioned is around this urban farming as on the one side, an outlet to have for fresh produce, obviously as well, but it's a really an awareness raising tool as well, what it actually means to produce. And I keep saying the tomato that you've grown yourself, you will not let rot in your fridge. And I think it's that sort of change, reconnecting to food. And the third point is the city level is absolutely critical in this. Cities do have a key role here, being closer to the individuals and very close to the local context. And you rightly pointed out that the local context matters so much, cultural ways of doing things. And here having those platforms for exchange that span across all the actors in the food value chain is absolutely important. So there's a real role here for the local governments as well. At the neighborhood level, there's a lot that is happening already.
Maximo, I think you also wanted to.
Only to add two elements, FAO has created this e-learning information system that will allow us to use instruments that could go to schools. What we know in terms of solid evidence is that there is an impact between kids to parents. So the upward intergenerational mobility of information works really well, meaning that if we teach something to the kids in the school, especially kids in the teenage age, between up to 13 or 14 years, it has a significant impact changing the behavior of parents. And that solves two problems. One is that, of course, we have a higher flow of information to parents on what they should be doing and to change behavior of kids too, but also it allows us to be a bridge to share information over parents, which sometimes is more difficult because of the level of education they have. In the rural areas, we have significant levels of parents that don't know how to read and write. So this could be a great instrument that is very cost effective because it's centralized in the school. So I fully agree with Mela on that. I think it's central to work with kids. Thank you.
Thank you, Maximo. I don't know if Angela would like to say something or...
Yes, I would like to add just 2 points. So the first one, I would say that's, well, the daily activity of food banks promotes awareness, and this is mainly due through our network of co-workers. We have more than 32,000 co-workers, and 84% of them are volunteers. So there is a kind of leverage effect through the volunteers and their families. And so it's a daily awareness also through the activities. Many food banks carry out activities such as breakfast clubs in schools, so with kids and teachers, where they can also raise awareness about food waste prevention and the activity of food banks. And some of our members also developed some brochures and posters to explain, for example, the difference between the expiry date, so the best before date, and the use by date. And these are materials which are available in national languages in order to facilitate the communication as much as possible. And then a last comment about the importance of people. Well, in our daily activity, the charities and people in need are at the center of our mission, core mission. And we do our activity because we want to help people in need. And so we try to do our best, also trying to provide a balanced diet. So we redistribute a lot of fruit and vegetables, but also food of animal origin, so meat, fish, and other kinds of food in order to provide a healthy diet if it's possible.
Thank you, Angela. I have a question from Jonas Hamann from Danfoss. Jonas is asking all the panelists, but I think also Maximo may be also very well placed to answer that. Jonas was asking that seeing the big challenge of food waste and loss, how does the panel see the opportunity in improving the cold chain versus home waste? What is the easiest considering technology versus consumer behavior?
Okay, if you want, I can give I already tried to write the response to her, but the point is the following. What we know in the production side is that the capacity of facilities of storage, especially in sub-Saharan Africa, for example, and in some parts of Asia, is very restricted. That means that producers cannot store the product for a long period of time. For example, a potato can be stored for 1 year or even 2 if it is properly stored. Fruits and vegetables, of course, there is other ways in which we can do it. And that means that having cooling facilities could reduce substantially what we call losses, because that will be part of the storage, so it's before the retail market. And that's something that I think is optimal investment, especially right now after COVID-19, because it also will increase the resilience of farmers to be able to go with prices and wait until their price is the best so that they can sell. So it's a good way to do it, and it benefits also the reduction of losses on the storage part. In the side of the consumer, I think the issue is again behavioral issue. Of course, consumers, if they know how to store food that is not being used so that they can continue using, that would be ideal. But it's more learning how to do it properly and transferring that information. But of course, being also able to have the solid evidence of what could be damaging for them. So we need to be very careful that food safety is also assured in these tools and this teaching that goes to the households.
Thank you, Maximo. I don't know if anybody else would like to react. Martin? Please.
Thank you. If I could come in here as well. And I think it's definitely not a question of either or. We need all the possible avenues that are there. So from technology all to behavioral change. And obviously you're right in saying the behavioral changes are often much, much harder to be achieved than rollout of a new technology fix. But it really can't serve as an excuse. We have to do both. If we have the best technology in place to extend the lifetime of products and people do throw it away in the end, it will not help us either. So it's really both. And on the cold chain, there's a number of things obviously that we need to keep in mind as well in terms of the energy efficiency. There's a lot of good things that are going on all along the cold chain, looking at the cooling products as well, just to chip that one in as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. If there's no other reactions, maybe we can move to the another question we received from EAT Food. Mr. Tommaso Emiliani is asking, food loss and waste reduction is often portrayed as a win-win situation, yet it currently doesn't happen at a sufficient rate in the European Union. Partially, it is because it is not economically beneficial to private businesses, which have an interest in selling as much as possible and little disincentives to produce waste. Do you see any alternative to regulatory interventions or sanctions from member states to incentivize the private sector to shift its business model? I think that's a question typically for Mela, but maybe Ms. Berry also would like to say something. Mela.
Thank you. Well, quite frankly, the food industry is very aware of this problem and is really fighting a battle to prevent it. So that the food industry has in its interest to produce more and more and sell more and more. Quite frankly, we are, and we are very aware of this, a victim also of climate change, and food waste has an impact there because of the greenhouse gas emissions that come from disposing of food in land pits, etc. So the food industry is aware and is fighting this battle daily. I can give you some examples. I'll just take a couple off the top of my head because I mean there are lots of examples, but Kellogg, for example, provides 15 million portions of food across Europe to different communities. That they have a long history of helping to deliver support to families in need. They have a Better Days platform. They launched that 7 or 8 years ago. Of course, the first priority is always to reduce the amount of waste, but when food cannot be sold and is still safe, food companies donate food to food banks and to other charity partners. And Kellogg, just for example, since March of this year, since March 2020, it has already distributed over 15 million servings of food. Now that's 460 tons of food, either to food banks, but also to feeding programs in different countries around Europe. And that's just one example of many. I have other examples from Nestle, from Unilever, from McCain. So frankly, food waste, the food industry is a victim also of climate change because we use more than 70% of the raw materials that come from European farms. And if because of climate change, there's a problem at farm level, well, then we're going to be a victim of that too. So we're aware of it, and the food industry is doing everything it can to actually reduce food waste. So I would not be in agreement with the chap who raised the question. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms. Berry, would you like to say something here? I have another question for you actually immediately afterwards.
Sure, I'm happy to say something. I think, obviously, from our perspective, what we see to be important is that we have to involve business in cooperation with other actors in the food chain. And this can be done by public-private partnerships, which we already see as being effective in some EU member states, for example, in the Netherlands. But I think very much as Mila's just said, we have to remember that usually for business, waste food means also waste of money or lost money. It's not really in their interest either that there is waste food. And the business case analysed so far showed that investments in food waste prevention can be very profitable. So what we have figures that show that for $1 of investments, there's $14 of return on that. So I think, at the end of the day, we shouldn't think that businesses are just out there to produce more and more food. It's in their interest as well that there isn't food waste.
Thank you very much. Now, I know you need probably to leave, Ms. Berry. So I have another question from the Uganda Embassy in Belgium for you. Ms. Esther Imede is asking, what is the Commission doing to optimize food packaging to address food waste?
So food packaging, I'm sure that Mela will have a word to say about this as well in terms of what the industry is doing. I mean, food packaging is very much on our agenda in terms of trying to reduce the amount of food packaging. We're also in the Farm to Fork strategy very careful about the production of packaging. I think what we need to do is not just make sure that the packaging that is produced is disposed of in the appropriate way, but also that upstream we have packaging which is easier to be disposed of and which is more biodegradable. So the Commission is working on all fronts to make sure not just that the packaging that is produced that we have already is disposed of properly, but also that the actual packaging itself is more appropriate and we don't have so much packaging in the first place.
Thank you very much. We have also a question from Martina Otto. Does it exist a way, asks Ms. Elisa Quaranta, or a database to know which kind and how many food waste there is at a specific regional or sub-regional area? Can we detect that? Martina, you're muted, I think. Still muted. There you go.
There we go. Thank you. Well, we do work, as I said, on the food waste index, and obviously that will help us to disentangle this question. Things are being done. It's very tedious actually because it needs to be done at a really you have to go into the household level to look at what has happened. So there is no overall database for this, but wherever a city or a country has gone through the process, there will be this kind of information available. So definitely it's something that is critical to know to take the right kind of actions. So I join you absolutely in this. And as I said, watch this space. We're in the process of coming forward with the methodology as well as with some modeling, because as I said, it's cumbersome to do things really at that sort of level. It's hard as well with the modeling because there's so many assumptions that need to go into it, and if you want it to be accurate, it's quite a challenge to do that. But we're working on it. Thank you.
I have a question for Maximo. When planning interventions and policy aimed at reducing the environmental footprint associated with food that is lost or wasted, should we focus at the production or at the consumption phase, in your view?
So if our objective is to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, the bigger payout will be at the consumer side, because that produce that is already in the retail market will have accumulated already significant amount of emissions, not only on the production side, but also on the transportation and processing. So that's where we can get a bigger return for the dollar investment in terms of innovation and bringing technologies to minimize that. If we are focusing more on natural resources, water, soils, and so on, the best thing is to focus at the producer level, because that's where we are going to be more efficient in the way we produce and more efficient in the way we use our resources. So again, the concept is a concept of trade-offs, and that's where we need to figure out where to minimize each of the trade-offs.
Okay, so I see we have somebody who raised their hand to speak live from Ericolto. The organization is enabling and supporting smallholder farmers. I think we can unmute you and hear your question live. Katur Utami Dewi is the name of the person. I cannot hear you. You are muted. Okay. I will go to another question. There is an FAO colleague who is actually asking from the regional office in Africa. And the question goes to Angela and Maximo. How do you, through your work, help reducing gender gaps in accessing technology and mechanization, as women are a main actor in post-harvesting processing, marketing, and distribution? And are food banks programs looking into increasing women capacities to collaborate with the private sector where the highest food waste occurs? Maybe Maximo can start.
Yeah, so I think there are two topics that you are referring to. One is the issue of technology being proper for being used by women. And that's something that has to be designed properly, because it's completely true that if you look at the packaging and processing part of the agricultural products, most of it is done by females. If you open a packaging plant, you will see that most of them is by female, and it's because of a reason, very thin fingers, which allow them to sort better or allow them to peel better, which is okay. But that's not the only issue, which I think the second element is even more important, is this job segmentation, meaning that women specialize in one part of the chain, creating a discrimination in terms of wage. So creating a wage gap, meaning that a female that has certain skills has an earning which is lower than a male that have exactly the same skills. If that is the case, then we need to work on that, and we need to identify how we can equalize the budgets, given that the skills are the same. And that's, I think, the major issue, because that will help to empower females more on the production side. And today with COVID-19, the major problem we are facing is not on the production side. The jobs at risk in the production side are around 28%. But in the processing, in the packaging and delivery, which is mostly done by females, 60% of those jobs are at risk because of the physical distance and because they need to restructure the whole way in which they do this process, because normally they are very close to each other. So it is increasing even more the inequality between females and male. So that's something that we need to focus a lot. And of course, it's related to food losses, but it's more finding solutions to have a more equitable labor market for females and with males. So it's really important issue to look at carefully. It's not just empowering, it's also giving the tools to empower, and that's reducing the wage gap when the skills are the same.
Angela, would you like to say something?
Yes, so I would like to add something about women and also then women and technology. Well, as regards women, as I said before, we have at European level more than 32,000 of co-workers, and most of them are women, of course, and they daily collaborate with food banks. They give their daily support to the activity of food banks. And if I can just give you a very simple and concrete example, here at the European Food Banks Federation, the whole team is made of women. So we are 4 women in the office, and we are working together, our membership every day. And then as regards women and technology, I think that there is a strong link because, for instance, and it's again a concrete example, in Ireland, our member Food Cloud was founded by two women when they were university students, and they met and they decided to do something to fight food waste, to prevent food waste in Ireland. And they decided to use technology, and they created this technology to connect retailers and charities. So to connect the demand and the offer of surplus food from retailers to charities. And so they created a technology which is today in place in Ireland, but also in the UK. And they are trying to develop this technology also in other countries to support the activity of food banks. And if you want to meet them, today we are organizing a virtual event, and I can publish the link, the direct link in the chat. And you can meet them in the virtual stand of Food Cloud, our Irish member, and you can ask them many questions and also more information.
Thank you very much, Angela. I know you have this exciting event today. Time is pressing, however, so if no other panelist has anything to add at this point, I'm very pleased to have with us Ms. Isabel Carvallals, member of the European Parliament and of the European Parliamentary Alliance Against Hunger and Malnutrition, to wrap up our event. Ms. Carvallals, what did you think of our discussion today?
Thank you so much, Mirto. It has been a pleasure to join you all in this meeting organized by the FAO Brussels office, marking the first celebration of the International Day of Awareness of Food Loss and Waste. Reducing food loss and waste is a task for all of us, as we said on several occasions during this morning. It involves producers, stakeholders of the food and supply chain, food industries, retailers, but also civil society, all of us as consumers. And this day is a call to action to all to bolster efforts to reduce food loss and waste. As a member of the European Parliamentary Alliance Against Hunger and Malnutrition, I would particularly echo that it is a call to action to contribute to ensuring food security for all, and particularly the most vulnerable. As highlighted by Rodrigo de la Puerta, addressing the inefficiency and weaknesses of our food systems that lead to important levels of food losses and waste is crucial to end the hunger and end all forms of malnutrition, as well as to advance the Sustainable Development Goals. We must keep this in mind at a time when, as Rodrigo underlined, we have in the world 690 million of hungry people, and with an additional 130 million people that could come on top of it as consequence of the COVID-19 pandemic. And the perspective of 10 billion people to feed by 2050, as Ms. Claire Berry mentioned this morning, must also be in our minds. As it was highlighted by our most distinguished speakers today, wasting or losing food means that all the resources that were used to produce it go to waste as well. And that additional emissions contributing to climate change are generated. I know Massimo Torero would say this much better than me, but let me have the freedom here to use data also from a very interesting PowerPoint available online, authored by FAO, titled Global Initiative on Food Loss and Waste Reduction, where it says, and I quote, "If food wastage were a country, it would be the third largest emitting country in the world." This was referring to data from 2011. I don't have more recent data, but I'm sure this wasteland remains in the top 10 at least. And this is how delirious waste and food loss has become over the years. FAO reported in 2011 that an estimated 1/3 or 30% of the world's food produced never reaches the consumer's plate. This is as much as 1.3 billion tons of edible food for human consumption that is lost and wasted every year across the entire supply chain. As we have been reminded today, this preliminary estimate has now been replaced with two separate indicators, the food loss index and the food waste index. And these methodological improvements are really, really important to find the best strategic approaches in the ground. For example, in 2019, FAO calculated the global food loss indicator, food loss from post-harvest up to, but not including retail, at 14%. And let me also recall an academic work by Brian Lipinski and 4 other colleagues. It dates from 2013, and it was also citing FAO. FAO is very much important as a resource for many academic works. And the authors alerted, and I quote, 32% of all food produced in the world was lost or wasted in 2009, 10 years ago. And this estimate is based on weight. When converted into calories, global food loss and waste amounts to approximately 24% of all food produced. Essentially, 1 out of every 4 food calories intended for people is not ultimately consumed by them. So this is not new. It's a structural problem, and we have to face it very, very seriously. In the EU alone, around 88 million tons of food waste are generated annually, with associated costs estimated at 143 billion euros. There was another figure that struck me this morning. It was this mention of food loss alone representing something like $400 billion, equivalent to 340 billion euros. And I cannot imagine how many homes, how many children we could actually feed well with these lost billions of euros every year. This serious problem needs to be addressed in ways that will lead to a real increase in the efficiency in the way our food is produced, distributed, and consumed. It is for this reason that the international community has agreed on a global goal, which is to halve per capita global food waste at the retail and consumer levels and reducing losses of food along production and supply chain, including post-harvest losses by 2030, namely the Sustainable Development Goal 12.3. The reduction in food losses and waste remains high on the agenda of the European Union. Member states have committed with this development goal, and the European Parliament has called to make this target a binding one. In the European Parliament, we are now working on the Farm to Fork strategy and on the EU Circular Economy Action Plan, and both, I believe, will be key in order to adopt more sustainable production and consumption models to achieve the transition of food systems at the EU as well at the international level. In today's discussion, we have learned a lot about food waste and food loss and how we can all contribute to reducing them. For instance, Massimo Torero from the FAO set the scene highlighting the importance of the issues at stake with some impressive data, as I already recalled it. Angela Frigo from FIBA highlighted very well how advancing innovation and digital technologies can help to reduce food loss and waste from farm to fork. And Martina Otto, for instance, from the UNEP has briefed us on the work on food waste and the development of the index. And I should say that both these presentations, for instance, highlighted very well, I think, the relevance of research, of improving methodologies for data collection, for data analysis, And indeed, science and academic research have been and will continue to be very good allies in this fight. Melle Fruwen, I think I'm saying correctly, sorry if I didn't say it well, from FoodDrink Europe, showed also how the food and drink industry can actually contribute to tackling the problem by taking action through training, for instance, through providing information to consumers along the chain, the entire chain, to increase efficiency of the whole process of production and distribution and to reduce waste. And Christophe from Too Good To Go presented how an app can actually help citizens to reduce food waste. Again, a very, very good example of how to combine innovation, technology in order to change mindsets, to change behaviors, to increase awareness, to increase the level of information. Solutions exist in form of policies and innovations, and we need to scale them up and make use of them. But we also need to change the way we look at our food and what we make of it. Let me just say this very briefly. When I was a child, my parents taught me that whenever a small piece of bread fell on the ground, I should immediately pick it up and kiss it because bread was sacred. And this had nothing to do with need or scarcity. In our case, that was not the case, and neither with a sort of side manifestation of religious beliefs, but mostly with this idea my parents passed on me that food was a gift, whether from God, from nature, from man's efforts. It depends on the way we look at things. That was not important, but it's always a gift. And in a sense, I think that we need to rescue this idea. We need to rescue food from the condition of banality. And one of the most vicious effects of such banalization is that it undermines actually the access to good, nutritious food as a fundamental human right. In this regard, I firmly believe that education and engaging the youth and children are key. And just to finish, let me bring your attention to the educational package, Do Good, Save Food. This is really a wonderful package of educational manuals on food waste reduction that has been produced by FAO in collaboration with International Food Waste Coalition, that exists already in many languages, English and French, but also in Croatian, Hungarian, Albanian. I know that translations into Ukrainian and Lithuanian are in progress, and hopefully soon in Romanian. And I also hope soon in Portuguese. After all, it's spoken by something like 265 million people in the world as a native language. So today reminded us that all our engagement is necessary to make the difference, and we all have a role to play. As parliamentarian, I am very much engaged to continuing to work on this, and I look forward to doing so with you in the future. Thank you very much. Muito obrigada.
Thank you very much, Ms. Carvalhais. I think your beautiful personal story was the perfect closing for this event. Let me remind you that the event is being recorded, and we will share the link with you very soon. Any questions that were not answered in the chat, and I see there are many, our technical team will endeavor to answer later on and share the document with you. We thank you again for being here with us today, and we're looking forward to welcoming you to our next Brussels Dialogue. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter to see our upcoming events, and do stay to watch a very nice last video, and have a very good day.
Reducing food losses along the supply chain and cutting food waste by 50% at a retail and consumer level is critical to achieving a sustainable world. But how are we going to do this? Harvesting produce can be extremely challenging. Inadequate tools or poor harvest techniques make it economically difficult for farmers to market products which are left unharvested. Poor handling, packaging and management along the supply chain can cause unnecessary waste. Adequate cold storage is crucial to prevent losses and preserve quality. Storage is a challenge for many people who do not have access to hermetic bags and refrigeration. Perfect produce often causes food to be wasted in supermarkets. Providing variety and having shelves always stocked for customers is another challenge that retailers face. Consumers tend to underestimate the amount they waste. Creating awareness of how much food is really wasted is vital to making a difference. Reducing food loss and waste substantially at the global level will not be easy. When a little bit of food is lost and wasted at every stage, from farm to consumer, it all adds up. It will require better information, targeted investments, and a change in our behavior. Whether you are a farmer, work in logistics, a retailer, or a consumer, everyone has a role to play in rising to the challenge.
Thank you all.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. Goodbye.
Thank you. Goodbye, everybody.
Thank you.
you